Have you told your friends that you see ghosts?
Oh, absolutely not.
Gina Rodriguez returns in Not Dead Yet.
I'm back, baby.
Who is that?
Oh, she's the obituary writer.
And Brad Garrett joins the brilliant ensemble cast.
Titan, Maverick, Titan of all Mavericks. These are all words used to describe me.
Not Dead Yet. Season premiere. Tonight, 8:30, 7:30 Central on ABC. And stream on Hulu.
It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Hello, this is Dr. Justin Coulson. So delighted to have a special guest with me on the Happy Families podcast today, Dr. Katrina Lines. Katrina is the CEO of Act for Kids, a charity that helps keep kids safe, heal from trauma, and lead happy lives. Katrina is also a registered psychologist. And the reason I'm talking with Katrina today is a recent survey that was conducted by Act for Kids caught my attention. I thought it was absolutely fascinating, and it's something that every single parent needs to hear. The report, or the campaign, is called Get Comfy Switching On by Switching Off. Dr. Lines, it's so good to have you on the Happy Families podcast. Thanks for joining me. What was the number one eye-opening finding from this research that you did with Australian families, Australian children?
Hi, Justin. Well, the most worrying finding was that 40% of kids aged 14 to 18 don't actually speak to anyone if they're worried. So they don't talk to anyone, which is really concerning.
So when I hear you say that, 40%, nearly half of kids who are in their mid to late teens, they're just shutting the world out. I think of the sullen, cranky, withdrawn, terrified, worried teen who just goes into their room and stares at a screen rather than engaging with life, engaging with parents, engaging with a school counsellor or a teacher or somebody that they can lean on. Am I getting that right? What are they doing if they're experiencing challenges in their life and they're not talking to somebody?
Well, that they don't talk to anybody. And that's actually really scary, as you say, because they're bottling up all of those emotions, all their worries, and they're making everything bigger in their head. As you know, if you don't talk to somebody and, try and get out those worries, and it all, amplifies in your head. And so our concern is that they're brewing mental health problems down the track. That's really what's happening.
Right. So you've worked as a registered psych for plenty of years. How often would you see this in a clinical setting? So someone comes in, they're really struggling, and you just find out that they've got no one to talk to, or rather, maybe it's that they've chosen not to talk to anyone.
It's actually really common in the clinical setting. If somebody ends up coming through the door, it's usually precipitated by, a crisis, or someone said to them, you need to go and talk to somebody, or something's happened, because they'll have spent a long time sitting, ruminating on something. So it is quite common.
And this is that thing where they're ruminating and it kind of turns into a catastrophe, doesn't it? There's so much build-up, so much angst, so much, unknown going on.
Well, and that's the case for young people as well. They've got all these pressures of, school and friends and social media and a whole host of things happening. And so it may be something small and solvable, or some emotions that they're feeling that if they talk to somebody and their emotions are acknowledged, then the feelings go away. They can help, an adult can help them manage it. But if they're bottling all that up, then it becomes big in their head.
Okay, so here's a really tough question. The 40% of kids who are talking to no one at all, how many of them have somebody to talk to but they're choosing not to talk to them? And how many of them just don't have someone they feel that they can talk to? They feel like their parents will shrug their shoulders and say, "I'll get over it. Stop being silly. You'll be fine. This is all in your head." So they're concerned about criticism from their parents. How many of them are in those two different situations?
So there's nearly 10% of them who say they have no close adult to talk to at all.
Wow.
10% of the whole sample. The problem, and where we came up with the campaign, switching off to switch on for kids, is because most kids say they don't listen. Their close adult doesn't listen. So 60% of them say that they sometimes or maybe listen. Only 30% of kids say their close adult always listens to them. So that's the trick. They probably have a close adult, And the kids who do talk to someone, the first person they talk to, 65% of them say their friends, then 64% of them say their parents or their carers, and then 33% say their sibling. So they do talk to their parents, like it's almost the same, percentage as friends. But there's a percentage of kids who don't believe their close adult listens to them, and so they give up, I think.
What's the outcome when children believe that either that close adult either A, isn't there at all, or B, is there but just doesn't listen and therefore doesn't care? What sort of outcomes do we see from a research point of view, and what sort of outcomes do you see at ACT for Kids when those adults are not perceived as available?
Well, kids feel unloved or uncared for. They don't feel like they're worthy of someone listening to them and their problems. They end up with, those problems amplified in their heads, and so they do end up with depression and anxiety. And we're seeing significant increases in young people in our services with depression, anxiety, and just general stress and worry since COVID. Like, it increased in COVID and it hasn't gone away.
I wrote a report just the other day, and I can't remember the name of the research that I lent on. I wish I had access to it right as we're talking. But while I was doing this research for this report, it indicated that prior to COVID, around about 15% of adolescents were showing up with anxiety disorders and anxiety challenges. Since COVID, we've seen that escalate to somewhere around 20 to 25% for boys and as much as 40 to 42% for girls. Like, the numbers are just astonishingly high over the last couple of years. When I'm listening to what you're saying, Katrina, it also reminded me of the classic Emmy Werner studies, the sociologist who went to that Hawaiian island and studied everybody in a certain community for about 40 years. And the number one finding that she uncovered as she did all of her research was at the very core of resilience, at the very core of avoiding maladaptive coping strategies, the stuff that kept kids in school, the stuff that kept kids in good relationships, the stuff that kept them out of jail and off drugs. The stuff that mattered the most was that they had a close, significant adult that they could talk to, whether it was a parent or a swim coach or a church leader or a school teacher or counselor or a neighbor or a grandpa or an auntie or an uncle. They just had to have a close adult that they could talk to. I'm hearing in your research that we've got nearly half of Australian children, or at least half the kids in the sample, a representative Australian sample, that are saying, I can't talk to anyone, they're not present for me. Am I getting that right?
Absolutely, and that's why we were really, really worried, because we're seeing those increased rates in all of our services of anxiety and stress, and very interested in what supports children and young people have. And, to have 40% of kids saying they don't talk to anybody is really, really concerning, because down the track they could end up with significant mental health issues, and certainly they must be struggling sleeping and, just going through their day and coping in general. And so having that close adult is someone who helps you learn to cope and co-regulates your emotions. And, the problem shared is problem halved is actually a really true saying. Just talking about it and having it out in the open, you realise, it's maybe not as big as I thought it was if somebody acknowledges it and your feelings.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions for you to get really practical around this. The first one is, a lot of parents will be listening to this and saying, I try. I'm there. Like, I ask the kids, what's going on? Can they talk to me? And they just shut me out. As a psychologist, what's your advice to parents who have kids who don't seem to be willing to communicate, even though the parent is present, available, and begging for that conversation?
Well, it's really hard, especially if you're going to start with a pointed question. Is everything okay? Because
right.
The kids are just going to go, yep, fine, no worries at all. What we've been advocating for is to people to start with small talk, because if you start with small talk and you build it into everyday incidental side-by-side things, so in the car, when you're getting dinner ready together, you're making lunches, all that kind of thing. So they're not the deer in the headlights and you're pinning them with the question, So and the more you do that and actually show that you're listening to them, so you're not on your phone, you're not answering the email, you're not thinking 5 days ahead to what's for dinner or who's going when, all of those things, because kids can tell when you're not listening. So it's those incidental things and connecting in with them. And so kids are on their devices all the time now. So you can just check in with them and go, how you going? Just thinking of you. Just a simple text or a meme that shows them that you're thinking of them, and just trying to build that small talk connection, because if you've built the small talk connection and you do things with them, then if there's a big talk that needs to happen, the kids will feel like you're listening to them and will actually talk to you.
Katrina, I was in the car the other day with one of the kids. She was in a bit of a poopy mood and Taylor Swift came on Spotify, and I looked at her and said, "Oh, can you believe we tried for 3 days to get tickets and we're not going? We couldn't get tickets." And she looked at me, rolled her eyes and said, "I'm so sad." and I was at because I've damaged my body recently, which I've shared on the podcast with my neck and my back and the breakages, the fractures, whatever. The physiotherapist said something recently that was all about my body, but it applies so much to what you've just described. He said, we need to keep our body moving. Motion is lotion. And I kind of feel like what you're describing, this idea of just getting some small talk going, it's the same concept. Motion is lotion. Once you get that little bit of small talk happening, it can build into a more substantive conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And showing you enjoy spending time with kids. Like, my kids are grown up now, but I just remember, some chaos, frenetic, getting food ready or packing lunches or, all that kind of stuff, and just feeling frazzled and thinking through all the 15 things that I had to keep in my brain. And kids just pick up on all that. And so if you just, try and, I don't know, it's really hard to do as a parent, and so I'm not preaching to people how to do it, but practical stuff is saying, okay, the next 15 minutes we're just going to hang together and we're going to put all of that over there and no one's going to look at it, or think about it, and devices and just try and build it in with rules around, okay, this is just us to hang.
Get comfy switching on by switching off. Really, it comes back to this saying that I've been using for a couple of decades now. It's not mine. I don't know who invented it. It's been around for a long time. I'd love to give attribution, but it's just one of those sayings that are part of the atmosphere. To a child, love is spelled T-I-M-E, and that's really at the core of what you're saying. These kids are saying they need it. Oh, I've got one more question for you. In the survey, you asked a question about how much time these 14 to 18-year-olds want to spend each day with the adults in their lives. Can you just talk about that for a moment?
I know, this blew us away. 1 to 2 hours per day.
So what were their options? They could choose from 0 up to a certain number of, like 4, 5, 6, 7 hours?
I think it was less than half an hour, 1 to 2 hours, more than 2 hours, and none. So 28% of kids said more than 2 hours.
Wow.
The majority of kids said 1 to 2 hours, and hardly any kid said none or less than half an hour. That just blew us away.
Yeah.
Because so they're really craving time, and the time they said that they wanted to spend was just hanging out together or chatting in the car or chatting while we're doing things. We gave them a list of options about when they would want their adult to listen to them. So they're really clear. They just want to hang out with the close adult and have the opportunity for that person to listen to them.
I love this finding. I mean, it flies in the face of everything that people have always said about teenagers. They're moody, they're solemn, they don't want to hang out with the adults, they're supposed to separate from their parents. And here we've got 14 to 18-year-olds saying, if I could spend 1 or 2 hours every day with my parents, I'd be stoked.
Yeah, quarter of them, more than a quarter of them want more than 2 hours.
Yeah.
Which is just outstanding.
Wow.
Yeah, but I mean, they don't want you to sit and,
they're not looking for the deep and meaningful conversation.
Yeah, that's right. They don't want that. They just want to be able to do stuff together.
Dr. Katrina Lines is the CEO of Act for Kids, a charity that helps keep kids safe, heal from trauma, and lead happy lives. The new report, the new campaign, Get Comfy Switching On by Switching Off. We'll link to it in the show notes. Katrina, what a delightful conversation. We so appreciate you spending some time with us on the Happy Families podcast to talk about something that I think will give a whole lot of parents of adolescents a whole lot of hope.
Thanks, Justin.
The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. And for more info about making your family happier, check out the show notes for the details of Act for Kids or visit us at happyfamilies.com.au.